everyone, it's Frankie-Lou. I'm coming to you today from the kitchen of the Grow Together homestead, where I am dealing with something that a lot of us in colder climates who like to garden are dealing with right now. Green tomatoes, okay? Here in southern Alberta, we've had a wonderful fall, nicest one on record, but there have been some frosts, so most folks who don't have a heated greenhouse have picked their green tomatoes by now. And I didn't get a great bumper crop, but some of my friends did and have very generously shared this with me. And I'm very excited because over the years, I have come to embrace the green tomato. Most folks want to know how to ripen up green tomatoes, and I will definitely show you some of my tricks for that because I do like having ripened tomatoes as well. But one of the things that I have done to embrace the climate that I live in is learn how to use green tomatoes as they are, because honestly they're a great little asset if you're into preserving. I'm going to use lots of these over the next few days to make some green tomato tartanade and some green tomato chutney. I'm also probably going to make a green tomato sauce. There's lots of things you can do with them. You can use them in relishes, and I will post more videos if I do get time to show you how to use some of these as they are. But I'm sure that most of you who are tuning in want to get some ideas as to how to make these ripen up into nice red or orange or yellow tomatoes if you're pulling them in like this. So here's a few tips. Those of you who watch my videos know that I've got a lot going on and I don't always have the time to take things to the extreme, and that's what I'm doing with these tomatoes as well. You could do more steps if you wanted to ensure that you get even more ripening with your green tomato harvest. But what I'm doing here is sort of a way that I've adapted several techniques over the year to get the best result with minimal amount of effort. Okay, so that's what I'm going to show you today. This works for me, and I hope you might give it a try if you're lucky enough to get a bounty like this. Okay, so first off, the tomatoes that you're going to choose to try to ripen. A lot of people think that you need to choose tomatoes that are like, say, like this one, and have a little bit of color on it and that they want to ripen. Yes, that is a good choice, but also I have ripened up tomatoes that are as green can be with no red on them. It's for what I have discovered over the years is what is far more important is to only choose to ripen up tomatoes that are completely intact, have no spots, no blemishes. You want to take the most perfect ones for your ripening and save the ones that have a little bit of maybe marking on them and use those right away in those other recipes I told you about that use green tomatoes. It doesn't matter if that tomato is really, really hard, it's still probably going to ripen up. In fact, I found that if a tomato is really hard, there's less chance of it developing mold. That is your biggest issue when you're trying to ripen up tomatoes, is that if there's any blemishes on the tomato, you could rot the whole box, okay, of tomatoes that you're attempting to ripen up if you're not careful. So what is more important is removing any that have any blemishes, just cut it out and use that for some other recipe right away, and making sure that those tomatoes are going into the ripening box nice and clean, okay? There's a couple other things you can look for. These ones are a really good choice because they still have these nice little, it's best to try to remove them from their vine with the stem still on, okay? They will ripen better that way, all right? So I'm gonna take a bunch of these and try to remove as carefully as I can so I'm not taking off the stem portion. If it comes off, it's not a big deal, but basically the reason you wanna do that is when you do remove a stem from one, there is going to be a slight damage to that tomato there, and you're introducing an area where mold can get in and cause some troubles. What you're trying to do is keep that tomato as intact as possible before you place it into where you're going to ripen it. Okay, so I've got a few here that I'm going to use that are nice with the stem still attached. Next off, and this might seem a bit excessive, and I will admit I haven't done this every time, but when I do, I get better results. I clean them, okay? Because there's dirt on here, there's spores on here, and if you're placing that together with a whole bunch of other tomatoes where there could be more humidity, you can cause the yeast or the mold that is on the outside of these tomatoes. The more that's there, the more likely that tomato is to rot. So I just use cool water and I give them a nice rinse off, and I use a nice clean cloth. This came right out of the dryer to dry all these tomatoes with, okay? And I want to make sure they're good and dry. Once again, we're thinking about preventing mold growth, okay, or rot as well. And so the drier you can get those tomatoes, the better. All right, you're looking for tomatoes that have nothing on them to indicate. Sometimes when people are pulling tomatoes because they're worried about frost, but they don't realize is that some of those tomatoes may already have a little bit of frost damage. Okay, so what you're looking for is, here's a perfect example. I'm not going to use this tomato to ripen, okay? You can see there's a little black spot on there. The rest of the tomato is fine. I'm gonna cut that out and use it in my jam recipe that I'm gonna process tomorrow instead. This is not going in the ripening bin. This perfect tomato is, okay? Now, how are we gonna ripen these? Well, there's lots of little tricks you can do. What you're looking to do is to force the tomato to ripen, and there's a gas that does that called ethylene. Now, you can force ripening to happen a little bit faster by introducing ethylene. You can do that by putting an apple in the bin and making sure that it's sealed very well, and that will cause it to ripen quickly. But I've also found that when you do that, especially with the apple, you're once again possibly introducing another agent that's going to introduce rot or mold. So I don't do that, okay? What I do is I find a box, depending on how many tomatoes I have. I'll do this one today just because I'm not going to go through this whole box to show you. But I like to layer these tomatoes in the box. But I'll just pretend I'm doing that now for you. I'll show you. Another one with rot, not using that. It's really important you inspect these tomatoes carefully while you're doing that. Not just, we're pretending to clean these, by the way. I will go back and clean them, but for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to show you this. This is very generous, but most of my friends know I'm a canning maniac, and if they give me produce, they're likely to get a few cans of the results over Christmas, right? So I have these tomatoes in a nice layer on the bottom of this box. I'm not going to try to have them overlapping. They're just sitting next to each other. You don't just have to use the one layer. What I found very effective is I find using packing paper or some other type of paper. You could use newspaper if you like. Putting that on top and doing another layer. Okay? And what you need, and you just keep at this until you have a full box. I could probably get 3 layers into this box, depending, because some of these smaller tomatoes could go on the top. What you do want to make sure you're doing though is checking this box as frequently as possible. Honestly, when these start to go, it's amazing how fast they can ripen. And I check them almost daily. Okay, so a lot of people are saying, well, why aren't you putting them on the windowsill? You can do that if you like, and I have ripened a few tomatoes that way, but when you're dealing with the massive tomatoes that I have here, I find that this is actually a more effective method. It's what I've been doing for years. It makes I got enough growing stuff on my windowsill right now, including some microgreens that I'm growing. I don't have room for a bunch of tomatoes, and I've honestly found this works better. So I'm gonna do another layer. You seem to like being placed somewhere where it's kind of cool and dark. It's really important that you're not crowding them too much, okay? Now, what you also want to do, if you've got boxes that have lids on them, What I really like to use, but of course I don't have any here right now, are file boxes, because they're a good size. They can get 3 or 4 layers of tomatoes, and then they have a lid. Okay, I don't have any of those this year, so making do with what I got. And instead what I'm doing is I place the paper so that it's almost become a lid. I've tucked it in, and that is now going to sit in my closet, and I'm going to check it every other day. I find that, I don't know why this happens, but over the years I've discovered that the ones on the bottom seem to ripen up quickest, probably because there's more ethylene being trapped in there with them. And you want to turn them every once in a while as well, just to make sure that there wasn't any mold spots that you've missed. Remove anything that's starting to get soft, but not in a good way, soft in the moldy way, because it's remarkable how quickly one little mold spot or one little rot spot will spread to the rest of your tomatoes, okay? Just be very, very sure that you're inspecting these tomatoes, not just when you're putting them in their nice little handy dandy ripening container, but also when you go to inspect them to see if they're ripening at all. And I like to move them around, turn them around, and I find that through doing this, I will get at least 3/4 of my tomatoes to ripen. Those that don't ripen, that's fine too, because like I said, there's tons and tons of wonderful recipes that I can use. So I hope that was helpful. I hope you'll give it a try. Don't think that of those green tomatoes as a waste. They're actually a very good resource here on the homestead that we've found. If you're interested in seeing some of those recipes and some of the other recipes that we do here, please do subscribe, because we do try to post those as frequently as we make them. And as always, I hope you'll take this chance to grow together today. Have a good one.